My name is Tess Milner. I'm the Executive Director of the Lamoille Chamber of Commerce, and we are co-hosting this with the Lamoille Regional Solid Waste Management District. We're requesting that everyone continue to keep themselves muted and stay muted unless you're responding to a question. Questions can be asked within the call box and with the chat box, and then we ask everyone to keep your questions and responses as short as possible to allow everyone to have the chance to be heard. We currently have, let's see, I'm just looking for all of our legislators that are here. We have David Iacovone. Is Dan here as well? We have a Dan. I don't know if it's Dan Noyes, but, and we also have Lucy Rogers. And they will be available if anyone happens to have any questions directly to the legislators. I'm going to go ahead and turn over the meeting to Susan.
Hi there, thanks Tess. Susan Alexander, and I manage the Lamoille Regional Solid Waste Management District. And big thank you to the Lamoille Chamber for being our partner in this and helping not only with the logistics, but with really reaching out to the business community, because this is a big change for how people have managed their food scraps in the past, and it's doubly complicated given the scenario in which we're living in right now. But we believe that we've made some real progress in making it much more accessible and much more understandable for people to know what this July 1, 2020 deadline is on banning food scraps from the landfill. So I want to just introduce the Lamoille Regional Solid Waste Management District. We have been working on our mission for almost 30 years, and our mission being to reduce the quantity and toxicity of materials that are going to the landfill. We have a network of facilities. Many of you are probably very familiar with them, and we have an incredible staff, and including Elly, who's the other partner in bringing this all together today. So. She'll give you a little more update on what we do and how we're doing it and how we're here to help you towards the end of this presentation. We do have some other speakers today, so I'm going to keep this short. I just want to thank everyone for being here. It's a beautiful sunny day, and I know that there are probably a few other things you might want to be doing right about now. But this is important, and we've been working really hard to try and get information out there. And it's also been a really long road and very confusing, I think, which is the main reason for having this kind of outreach event, is that for the past 8 years, the original bill was passed in 2012, I believe, with a long lead-in time for this ban that would give people the opportunity to develop programs and to think about how it affects them personally, and to develop the infrastructure to make it possible to divert organics out of the landfill. So over the past 8 years, we've had a lot of efforts have been put forward to delay or amend, and it has been pushed back a couple of times. I think we've ironed out, and the legislature has ironed out all of the potential barriers and impacts that this would have. And finally, you know, we're really excited it's coming to fruition on July 1, 2 weeks away. So with that, I'm just going to introduce, we have some really talented, smart, and hopeful people with us today. We have Alyssa Icor from the Agency of Natural Resources. Alyssa is in the solid waste program, is very familiar with all the elements of this bill, and it is indeed a state law, and so she can really speak to all of the details of the law, the enforcement, how, you know, what they've been doing at the state level to help people come into compliance and to get ready for this big change. It looks like we also have Greg Stefanski. Is it Greg there? Who is going to say a few words. Greg and his family and friends have started a nice niche organics hauling business recently, and we were really excited about working with them in the Johnson area, and as I understand a little bit in the Morrisville area now, but Greg will give you firsthand information on what he's doing and how it works. We also have Donnie Hoffman from Black Dirt Farm, and we've been partnering with Black Dirt Farm for a long time. They have in the past brought us a lot of food scraps that they've collected. And Carolyn Grudinsky here from Grow Compost, I think, although I don't see her on my screen right now. Grow Compost operates out of the Moortown area and collects a lot of food scraps in the Stowe area for our region. Lindsay Toy is from Mountainside Resort. There's Lindsay, and they're actually someone who are making great strides forward, a commercial entity, and they're going to talk, she's going to talk a little bit about what they're doing and how they're going to fully implement Act 148. And we also have a few legislators, as Tess said, and I think Representative Pat joined us since then. So we have Representatives Iacovone, Rogers, and Pat, I believe. They may not all have been around when the original act was passed, because as I said, it was 8 years ago, but they surely have been hearing that it's been back and forth in the legislature, whether it should be delayed, whether it should be amended. So they're here to help with any questions you might have as well. So I don't want to take up any more time because we have a tight schedule and a lot of people. So I'm going to let Alyssa take over at this point, and there'll be lots of opportunities to ask questions. And Tess, is there a command for how people ask questions, or at what point they ask questions?
Well, we do have some questions that were submitted via email that we're going to go through first. And then if anyone happens to have any questions that are here and present in the meeting, you can go ahead and enter your questions into the chat box. And I will go ahead and ask that of the panel.
Great. And if you have any problems getting in the chat box, give us a wave and we'll try and acknowledge you. So thank you. And thanks, Alyssa. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, my pleasure, Susan. Although the host does need to enable screen sharing, so I do have a few slides. So thank you, Elly and Tess and Susan, for arranging this. It would have been nice to be in person, but this is a good alternative. So I am going to do the most rapid run through of the food scrap management requirements and what this law, why it exists and what it entails, with plenty of time for questions. So as Susan mentioned, it was passed in 2012. So even though this is a new food scrap requirement, it's actually a pretty old law with a pretty large lead-in. But it was passed unanimously by the legislature in 2012. And it's also the same law that bans recycling from the landfill as well. And the impetus behind this law is because nearly half of what Vermonters send to the landfill didn't have to go there. And so this particular figure is breaking down landfill material by weight. And so you'll see that by weight, organic materials, this is food scraps, leaf and yard debris, and wood, is actually the single largest component of what goes to the landfill here in Vermont. And of course, that's not the best way for our materials to end up. So we have this waste management hierarchy for organic material, with the primary reason being, or the number one thing to do with food scraps or organic waste in general, is to not generate it in the first place. Next, to feed people when possible. So this is where the food banks, food rescue fit in. If the food can't go to people, maybe it can go to animals, as it does at Grow Compost and many farms throughout the state. And then next is sort of classic food scrap management that you probably is what you think of. So composting and anaerobic digestion. And this is where the food scraps have the opportunity to really get their full potential and beneficial use, well, apart from being eaten, but with their anaerobic digesting, they're producing methane, which is then used to produce energy. Or in the case of composting, the nutrients then become a soil amendment that can then help grow more plants. And then the very bottom is actually energy recovery, which is burning clean wood, so not related to food. And so we're all on the same page. So food scraps are parts of food that are not typically eaten. So this includes peels, rinds, cores, shells, pits, seeds, bones, etc. But also food that's no longer good for eating. So this could be plate scrapings or leftovers that have gone bad, or off-spec food from the manufacturing process. Yes, coffee grounds and filters, tea and paper tea bags are included. And yes, meat and bones are included. However, there is an exemption written into the law, so anyone who composts at home in their backyard are allowed fully under the law to continue throwing meat and bones into the trash. And this is because backyard bins just don't get as hot as a commercial composting facility, and so they don't break down the meat and bones efficiently. But for food scrap drop-offs and pickups, meat and bones are completely fine to include. So exactly what is required? The law states that no person shall knowingly dispose of the landfill banned materials. And so step one is simply separating the food scraps from the trash, from the recycling, and collecting it. Maybe it's a container on your counter, under the sink. Maybe it's a cafeteria sort bin. You know, depending on your situation, step one is always collecting the food scrap material separately. And then come the options. So there are food scrap drop-offs throughout the state. Any facility, such as a transfer station that collects trash, also accepts food scraps. Many people also manage their own food scraps on site, such as having a backyard compost bin. And then it's really exciting that we have some food scrap haulers here today, because pickup, curbside food scrap pickup is sort of the third option that's not available everywhere in the state, but we are having more and more sort of these boutique food scrap haulers come on all the time. So this is being an increasingly viable option for Vermonters. I want to go into the haulers requirement a little bit, because this is really the part of the law that sort of had the most pushback in the last 8 years, and it has changed a little bit. So where it currently stands is that food scrap collection must be offered by trash haulers if they serve a business account or apartments with 4 or more units. However, there is an exemption if there is another food scrap hauler that is willing and able to offer that service in that region. So what this means for businesses or for apartments of 4 or more units is that there's going to be at least one hauler that will offer the food scrap collection service in their area. For simply residential routes, however, there may or may not be food scrap haulers available. We keep a list of food scrap haulers updated at our website, btrecycles.com. So what are the expectations? Bring you back to what is written in statute is that no person shall knowingly dispose of the landfill banned materials. And so as of July 1st, that will include food scraps for all of Vermonters. But what we're expecting is not just a single solution for the entire state of Vermont. So the first step really is being thoughtful, figuring out what are your goals. Are you looking to create compost for a garden, or are you just looking to manage your food scraps and get rid of them? What are your needs? Do you have a lot of food scraps? Or do you have a small amount of food scraps? And what are the challenges or barriers that are making this behavioral shift difficult? Once you have an idea of really what your goals are, what you're needing, and what hurdles you have to overcome to get there, then you can start figuring out what system you should put in place. And there really is not just one system. Food scrap management will look different in a home than it does in a business. It'll look different in a restaurant than in a food manufacturing or a grocery store versus a farmer's market or a campground. All of these are places where we're expecting that proper food scrap management should be possible. So someone could, eat an apple and not have to throw their core in the trash. But the exact system is really going to be variable. And this is where your local district, such as Lamoille, is really the experts for helping you connect to your local resources. Although at the state, we're always very willing to sort of troubleshoot and figure out what system will work for individuals, either households or businesses or anything in between. So we can go through now just a couple of these sort of more nuanced things. So with public spaces, the universal recycling law wrote in a stipulation that public spaces, like parks, must have recycling bins paired with trash bins. But there is no similar requirement for food scrap collection, so parks don't need to have a 3-bin system. They could, but it's not required. And then I also want to talk a little bit very briefly about garbage disposals. So when food scraps go down in garbage disposal, they actually switch from being food scraps, solid waste, to being liquefied and gone down to the municipal sewer, where they're the purview of the water treatment facility. So yes, if food scraps go down the garbage disposal, down the drain, that is technically in compliance with the universal recycling law. However, it's not what the system was really meant to do, and it can't handle everything. So things like peach pits, can't go down a garbage disposal. Things like fats, oil, and grease will really clog the system. But whether you have a private septic system or if you're on a public sewer system, high amounts of food scraps really can clog pipes and lead to problems. So although it's not against the law, it's also not recommended for like the #1 way of managing food scraps. And then this question about enforcement. So we always view outreach as our very first step. Our team has done visits to over 200 businesses throughout the Vermont. Yes, we're not doing in-person visits right now, but that type of outreach, or just letting people know what the requirements are, what we expect of them, is always our first course of action. We do follow up on complaints, however, but even then we're looking for voluntary compliance. So it's complaint, reach out, educate, talk about what the expectations are and the window of time in which to meet those expectations. And we are never actually opening up bags and sorting through trash and looking for those stray food scraps or recycling, and we're not expecting anyone else to do that either. So I just wanted to end on a little positive note. So if all Vermonters were to compost their food scraps, it would be equivalent in greenhouse gas reductions to taking 9,500 cars off the road. And this is because putting food scraps in a landfill actually reduces methane, which is a much more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is, whereas composting food scraps has a net result of reducing greenhouse gases. And so this is really the reason why this law was put into place, and it's just a nice tangible way that all Vermonters can benefit the state, help climate change, and so it's exciting to see sort of those numbers and the potential that we have to make a positive impact. So that's my little whirlwind. Plenty of time for questions and the other speakers. I have my contact info here, and we have a lot of information on our website, again, which is vtrecycles.com.
Thanks so much, Alyssa. That was really helpful. Greg, are you able to share a little bit what you're doing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I can just give a quick rundown. So the name of our organization is Regreen VT. This sprung from an idea a few years ago when my son and I were hearing about Act 148 coming into place. And so it has turned into a business that kicked off really in January with a focus on hauling local food scraps over to Lamoille soil. We're big fans of Chris and really appreciate the support that we've gotten from Elly and Susan Yu and Joyce as well to really help us figure out how to get this business started. So right now, Regreen VT is really focused on two things: picking up food scraps from residences and small commercial operations, and then also delivering finished compost from primarily Lamoille soil, although it's been a hot product this year. And so we're waiting a couple more weeks for some more of that good stuff to come down the line. So right now we're primarily focused. We started in Johnson. That's where we live. And so we wanted to start small and build up. So we've got several customers in Johnson, residential customers, but have been recently moving out. We've just picked up a couple customers in Cambridge, and we'll be working with folks in Morrisville. And I believe it's one of our Morrisville connections that was the hope for me to focus on this evening. So Brooklyn Heights is a condo complex in Morrisville off Brooklyn Street, so fitting name. And Leslie Schuster reached out to us after a connection with the Solid Waste Management District. And so what we're looking to do with them is actually, we're primarily with our residences, we're using 5-gallon buckets and picking those up on a weekly basis or every other week, depending on how much the home is or housing unit is producing. But we're also, oh, hey, thank you, Elly. Yes. So 5-gallon buckets, where would we be without them? And so, but with some of our other customers, we're using the 48-gallon totes. They're on rollers, the ones that you usually see out for, that are also used for garbage pickup. And so with Brooklyn Heights, there are 30 units and about 35 residents. And there's sort of a central area where they are already collecting their garbage and recycling. And so after meeting with them, it seemed to make sense that we would provide a tote, a 48-gallon tote for them, and that it would be stored and kept in the same area where they're bringing their garbage and their recycling items. So we will be bringing a tote to them to kick things off for July. And we're also really excited because we're going to get a chance. They conveniently had scheduled a board meeting or a unit meeting, I guess. I'm not sure what the condo association meeting, I guess, for the 23rd, so next week. And so we're going to get a chance to meet with all the residents, share the information about the acceptable and non-acceptable items list, and to just sort of practically walk through the steps of what it'll mean to take their food scraps from their units and getting them out to the tote, and then the role that we'll play in terms of picking up the full totes and bringing in empty totes. But we are also talking to some other places about units like that where there are multiple units or apartments. And in some cases, it's making more sense to have buckets with each of the residents in a unit. And so we've set up our pricing structure to hopefully be flexible and meet the needs of individuals and associations while allowing us to cover our costs as well. So we're really excited. We're really kind of kicking into high gear. We've definitely noticed an uptick in calls and email messages over the past couple of weeks. And I think the statewide and the local campaigns, nice work, Elly, really do seem to be getting the word out, and we're seeing people are paying attention and they want to play their part. And I think that really gets back to the heart and soul of Regreen VT. It's just the recognition there's a significant difference we can all make in terms of taking care of our environment and keeping our food in that that really close and closed loop system. And we're excited to be a part of that. So happy to take questions about our work, and appreciate the opportunity to inform more people about Regreen VT. Thank you, Susan.
Great, thank you, Greg. We love the entrepreneurial spirit behind this and the energy, especially from the young people in our community. That's really important. And as Alyssa had said, if you recall from her presentation, haulers are not required to offer to residential. So this is an opportunity that they have seen and taken advantage of. And we really love working with you. So any questions for him, put them into your chat box and we'll move on from there. Donnie and Carolyn, Donnie Hoffman is with Black Dirt Farm. They have been led by Tom Gilbert. They have been in the business probably longer than most people in Vermont and do an incredible job. Have had a chicken feeding operation, really using regenerative agriculture as the model for their programming. And welcome you to make a couple of comments if you want. We don't have a ton of time because we have a lot of speakers, but we'd love to, now that you're here, we weren't sure you guys were going to be able to be here. So we appreciate you being here and take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about what your model is and how it works.
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in. Thank you, Susan. My name's Donnie. I work at Black Dirt Farm. We're a family farm over in Stannard, Vermont. And as Susan said, I've been with Black Dirt for about 2 years now, and we've been collecting food scraps from St. Johnsbury to now Johnson for upwards of 5 years, and Tom worked at Highfield Composting before then. So we have been collecting food scraps for quite a while. Our model follows the carbon molecule throughout the food system. So we start by going off the farm and working mainly with commercial accounts to pick up their food scraps. So we work with a lot of schools. We work with some manufacturers, we work with restaurants, and also some state contracts like the prison and some hospitals. So our clientele is quite broad. And you might see our truck and our trailer driving around Morrisville from time to time. So we collect the food scraps, and then we bring the majority of them back to the farm, but we also drop off at Lamoille Soil and a partner farm in Linden. And the material is first blended into a foraging mix for laying hens. And so the hens go in and they eat all the good stuff that they can get from that material, lots of proteins, bacteria, bugs. And then we take that material and we put it into windrows and make compost up from it. And we divert some of that compost into a worm bin where red wiggler worms go through and create an even more concentrated compost product. And our products are available for sale to professional growers, home gardeners, through direct from the farm, and also through a diverse network of companies within Vermont. And then finally, we do grow some crops at the farm. So our specialties are salad greens and tomatoes, and you can get those products locally, mainly in Hardwick and Greensboro, but also from the farm stand. And so we're excited about this new opportunity in July. It's exciting to have people become more aware of removing food scraps from the landfill and the benefits that it can have, not only environmentally, but socially too. So we're excited to be here and to have folks like Greg come in and fill places that we just can't fill. So it's exciting to see the growth in this space. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Donnie. If you haven't been to their farm stand, yeah, they have phenomenal things like eggs and greens that they raise on their farm, but I also had a great experience getting some locally made donuts there a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, those are a big draw.
Friday mornings. Okay, thanks. Carolyn, are you able to give us a few minutes of explanation about Grow Compost? You guys have also been in the business for a long time here in Vermont. I, in a previous position, worked with Ransom's when they were first starting their composting facility in Moortown, and it has evolved considerably since then. So happy to have you here and tell us a little bit about your business model and what you offer in the area. I think you're muted, Carolyn.
Yes. We have been actually collecting food scraps for 10 years, but the farm started earlier as a family operation, and the local schools and some local businesses wanted to put food scraps into their compost. And with the passage of Act 148, the company Grow Compost decided to grow the side of their business that's food scrap hauling. And that's why I was hired specifically to help grow the food scrap hauling business. And over the past 10 years, we've grown to collect food scraps pretty much statewide. We provide our service to just about any business that generates food scraps, whether it's a ski resort or a hospital or schools, B&Bs, basically any business. We're also, especially with the with the July 1st deadline, we are getting a lot of calls from condo association, homeowner associations. So I guess it was Greg that was mentioning 48-gallon totes. We don't do smaller sizes. And so ours are appropriate for, multifamily housing. And it sounds like Greg does both buckets and 48 gallons. And we are in pretty much Morrisville, Stowe, a number of sections of Lamoille County. And we, one of the things we really work hard to make sure a program, we customize our programs and provide a lot of training materials on startup. That's really our program in a nutshell. Oh, I didn't even talk about what we use the materials for. The most important thing, we have 2 composting sites. One is in Moortown, one is in North Heartland. Some of our materials, primarily what we're collecting through a packaged waste program, which is the grocery stores and generators that have expired or damaged packaged goods. And we work with an anaerobic digester. It's located on a farm, and materials, the food scraps are used to produce renewable energy, animal bedding, and fertilizer on the farm.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. And just let me, if I have this right, a little nuance here is that you do multifamily housing units, but you don't do individual residents. Is that correct?
No, I mean, not unless a bunch of houses wanted to get together. I mean, we
Right.
have some smaller multifamily where they've added some of the individual homes.
Right.
So in
Okay.
other words, you know, it's going to be at least 8 or 10 units to fill the 48. That's kind of the minimal that we have, and it makes it, you know, economic.
Sure.
And up from there. And what we've learned, it's not just units, it's whether it's elderly housing or whether it's bigger families. You can't just say units, so many units per tote. It really depends on the individual association or whoever is using the totes.
Great, thank you so much. And again, questions, go to your chat room, and we'll keep going down the line. We have Lindsay Toy from Mountainside Resort. So this is switching gears a little bit. You've just heard from 3 people who are providing unique hauling services, each a little bit different, each with a little different model, but all doing exactly what we are hoping to see happen and make it available for all businesses and all residents in Vermont, or in Lamoille County. And Lindsay, we haven't met yet, so hello. I know you've been working quite a bit with Elly, and welcome you to talk about what you're trying to do at your resort area.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys so much for having me today. My name's Lindsay, and I'm the office and brand manager at Mountainside Resort. And I'm super excited to talk about how we're about to handle composting on a commercial scale. We just got like all our vessels in this week to really start putting it into place. And a little bit about Mountainside: we are a homeowners association. That term keeps getting thrown around, and we host, you know, so many different types of individuals at our resort. We have people that live there year round. We have partial owners, so timeshare owners that only come for a week or 2 and then they leave. And then we also rent units, so we're seeing all different types of people to educate. You know, within our 88 condos, 10 residential buildings, we have an office, a pool and gym building. And I originally contacted Elly saying, help, I'm not quite sure where to start, what to do. I had all types of worries going into it. My biggest ones were cost. That's something we hadn't built into our budget, believe it or not, for 2020. I wasn't sure the best way to educate, and I wasn't sure how or where to store any compost. I was kind of just starting from scratch. You know, ask myself like questions: where should we keep it on site? How do I prevent animals from getting into it? Won't it smell? You know, what's a normal amount to pay for a hauler to take it away? Should we donate it to a farm? Just everything that I feel like is on the minds of so many Vermonters at this time. So Elly was kind enough to actually come to Mountainside. This was quite a few months ago, before the dreaded COVID-19 hit, and we walked around the association, and we had some great conversations about our struggles. She met with our property manager, and we were talking about our business type, and it was the first time I felt like I had my head above water, to be fair. And honestly, our 3 things that we decided to concentrate on moving forward is to educate guests, to use consistent signage, and to be available for change, I would say, as we move into composting. currently our plan, which I just got these in today, I'm like super excited, brought one home to show everyone. We bought compost bins like this, like a good size compost bin for every condo on site to have on the counter, and all our guests are going to be responsible for putting all their food scraps in at the end of their stay and taking it out to 5-gallon buckets. Where we keep at every trash and recycling location. So that right now, 10 residential buildings, we have 2 trash and recycling locations. So we'll have about 20 buckets to be picked up every Saturday. And what happens is guests will put them into the 5-gallon buckets. And then I'm actually really excited about these guys too, is we have these really awesome twist top lids, which you guys may be familiar with, but this will keep animals out. Keep it nice and safe. And every Saturday what happens, that's our timeshare changeover, so we can change over 30 to 40 condos on that day, and maintenance will come by. They'll actually swap the buckets out for clean ones, so we'll actually have 40 buckets on site. Take that to Stowe transfer station, and then we'll be able to rinse the buckets and start the process all over again. Let's see. Yeah, and just a little bit about Mountainside and how we plan to move forward. Like I said, my biggest thing is just education, communication, and being able to change. Like I said, we're starting with 5-gallon buckets, but maybe eventually we will need to move to larger totes.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's a really compelling story, because we understand that most people have 150 other things to think about in their daily lives and in their regular tasks as employees, and that somewhere at the end of that line is, oh, so how do I manage food scraps? And we're really encouraged by the enthusiasm and the good thoughtfulness that you've put into this. And that sounds like you've got a successful plan in place. And I know you mentioned Elly helping you out, and that's what we're here for. So hopefully your introduction to what you're doing will inspire others who are listening today. So awesome. Thanks so much.
That's what I can hope for.
Yes, great. So Tess, I think that we had some questions that were sent to us ahead of time, and I don't know if they're specific people or general questions. So I'm going to let you take that on and get the questions out there, and we'll figure out how to get good answers. And if we can't get answers, we'll get the right people to get back with you. So let's switch to that.
We did have a few questions that were submitted via email before the meeting. So I am just going to go through them one by one, and we can open up the floor to them being answered. The first question, we already compost veggie and paper waste, but how do we compost meat scraps and bone? Is there anyone who would like to answer that?
I feel like there are several of us who could do that. I'll take it. I'll give one answer, and then Alyssa and Susan, you can give another. How about that? All right. Awesome. So I would love to walk you into my backyard, but my Wi-Fi doesn't reach that far. So what I do here is I have a green cone, and that's where I put my meat and bones and grease and dairy and moldy things and spoiled things and anything that I'm not going to put in my regular pile. That's where I put all of that stuff here in my own backyard. That's how I manage those things.
So Elly, that's a great option for a lot of people. They may not know what a green cone is, but I think you can see them on our website or follow up with us and see how they work. They work different than a compost bin. I know that some people who do home composting, they also take their meat scraps and their bones and they stick them in the freezer, and then they'll bring them to one of our facilities when they, running out of space, or they need to take a visit to our facility for some other reason. So you can green cone in your backyard. You can bring that to our facilities. Our composting facility, Lamoille Soil, is big enough and gets hot enough that we can manage those materials in our compost piles. So, Alyssa, I bet you have something else to offer on that one.
Well, I love starting though with the actual, like, yes, you can manage meat and bones in a way that is not just sending them to the landfill. Like, that's a really great reminder that options are the most important part, but that you don't have to start with, oh, right, there's an exemption and you're allowed to throw them in the trash, which is what I find myself reassuring people all the time. So yes, there is an exemption written into the law. So if anyone composts in their backyard, they can throw meat and bones into the trash, but if they have a nice sunny spot and want to invest in a soil saver, that's amazing. Or if they bring their trash to the transfer station and they can just tuck the meat and bones away in the freezer and then bring it with them, then that's even better as well. So I think this is a great example of options for managing successfully.
Wonderful. Thank you for those answers. I'm going to go on to the next question. We actually had two questions that are involving paper products. One person wrote, I've heard that one can put shredded paper into compost as part of the brown component. What about the ink on the paper, and is that harmful in any way? Another person in the meeting here was asking if compostable bags and boxes are acceptable.
I'm going to take an introductory swipe at that just to say that whatever is going in your compost bucket really depends on where it's going to go. So the Lamoille Soil has a standard, but I know Black Dirt Farm and Grow Compost also have standards of what they accept. So I'm going to let Donnie and Carolyn jump in and see what their program allows for.
Oh, go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, it doesn't matter, but I totally agree that that's a really important question whenever you're checking with composters. What are the end markets? In the case of our company, we have a food scraps only stream, goes to our compost sites. At this point, paper products are not allowed for organically certified soil. Whether that changes in the future, I don't know. But we do allow a certain percentage of compostables to go in another end market, which is our anaerobic digester. So it really is important it depends on the markets. And our prices incentivize clean food scraps only. That's what we want. And if we are taking the compostables, they have less energy value, and the fiber stream can go into the animal bedding or the fertilizer, but it's really, the food is what we want as the priority for the energy. That's all.
And at Black Dirt, we accept products that are 100% fiber. So if a customer is interested in using a disposable product, we ask them to pass it by us just so we can eyeball it and make sure that it passes our criteria. We have steered clear of things like shredded paper just because we're more worried about what could get in with that shredded paper and the contaminants that could be introduced by that stream. In terms of ink, it's a great question. A lot of inks these days are soy or plant-based, but again, it's just not something that we're actively introducing into our blend. So. But in terms of the compostable product, where we do not accept any greenware or the biodegradable plastic at this point in time.
And then I can speak to backyard, putting things in your backyard pile. One of the things I both love and dislike about backyard composting is that there's no one way to do it. There's no cookbook. There's no recipe for what's right and wrong. It's really open for experimenting and for whatever you're comfortable with putting in your pile. So I do shredded paper in mine, but I don't do receipts. I make sure there aren't like carbon copies of checks, like triplicate copies of checks in there, no photographs. credit card chunks. Donnie, I don't know if those were the contaminants that you were referring to, maybe being in with shredded paper.
Yeah, or glossy materials, and it's just the discerning eye can be challenging if you're not thinking in that way.
Yep. The windows and envelopes, things like that. But white shredded office paper, I use heavily in my backyard pile. I'm going to encourage other people to do that too. Cardboard, toilet paper rolls, ripping it up, newspaper, shredding that up. I think those are all really good things to put in a backyard pile, because as home composters, carbon is something that we are usually really challenged to have enough of. And that's a really important part to have on hand to have successful backyard composting. So I encourage people, when I'm educating about how to have a good backyard pile, I encourage paper and cardboard to be used in backyard piles as much as possible. So as Donnie pointed out, most inks on any of those materials are soy-based now. There really isn't a lot of heavy metal-based printing anymore, and that was where that no paper in the piles came from. And that's a pretty low risk anymore. Nothing glossy, plain white office paper and newspaper and cardboard is safe to use in your backyard piles.
Wonderful. All right. The next question is, how are small condo associations doing the best job with the food scrap law?
Well, we heard from Lindsay that they're just about to embark on this. Anyone else out there? Grow compost, or we heard Greg's about to work with the homeowners association. So homeowners, condos, I think, some, maybe the nuance there is that some are permanent long-term residents and others turn over pretty regularly. So there's a slightly different challenge there with that kind of transient community. But anyone?
I just have a comment about that. One thing that I've learned in the experience is partly out of our drop-off site at Grow. Our trash and our recycling in many cases is right at your home. You put anything in there. If people have to take a little bit of extra effort to bring a food scraps, let's say, to a centralized place at a condo association, homeowner association, the people that are going to participate in the program do it right. I find if they have to do a little bit more to bring their compost, if the convenience factor is just a tiny little bit different from their trash and recycling, it's the people that really want to do it. And we find, I just thought that homeowner associations would be way more contaminated. The biggest issue, which we do a lot of training, is the bio bags. We don't want the bio bags, but with really good posters and prepping people and letting them know as soon as the program starts if there's problems, kind of nipping it in the bud, we have had pretty great success with condos, and even with ones that are like you were saying, like at ski areas where people are doing timeshares. It's a lot about education, having a poster right at the tote, having somebody that's a point person that can address issues.
Thanks, Carolyn. And I'll try not to get too preachy about this, but one of the things I always like to think about is, think back about 100 years ago when food scraps had value. First of all, you didn't have as many food scraps because you didn't waste food. It was so much more valuable and it was so much more difficult to get. A lot of things got recycled and reused because it was, again, harder to get to a store. The money to buy those things were less. And that trash really represented the smallest portion of your entire waste stream, because we just have become so much more used to convenience and being able to purchase things, or the level of consumerism is up so much. So if you just can't even think about how we educate people to sort of flip back, think about how it was really easily done 100 years ago, and that whole paradigm of it's trash first, then recycling and food scraps, as opposed to saying, each one of those we need to manage, and we can manage them and separately. And I don't know about you, but my house, recycling takes up far more space than my trash. So, but yet we pay for them differently. We pay for trash generally higher rates than we do for things like recycling and food scrap diversion generally costs less as a tipping fee than landfilling fees do. So I'll stop preaching on that one.
All right, and the last question we have that was submitted is, how do I keep bears out of my bin? And maybe we should include all animals like raccoons for that matter, because they can get in there just as much as bears can.
Who's going to take that one? I'm sure there are a lot of people thinking they've got some idea how to do it, but who's actually had to do it because they've had bears in their yard or raccoons or skunks?
I can just say with Grow Compost, are people hearing me? That, okay, that we work hard with in bear country, you know, if we're in Waitsfield is a big problem, or to have totes kept inside, because if bears find out that there's food scraps housed somewhere, I mean, I'm not talking about the backyard bins, I'm talking about our 48-gallon totes. That's really the best place if you have bear issues. For smaller rodents, we find that just a bungee cord over our totes really deters them, and keeping the program clean, not overfilling totes. But backyard composting, all different answers. So let someone else answer that.
Avram, are you saying goodbye, or are you hoping to answer a question?
No, I can address that a little bit and just give people some information. What I learned today, because there was some discussion online among House members several hours ago, is if you go to the Department of Fish and Wildlife's website, there is a page called Composting in Bear Country. And I read it, and it's really good. And people who have that concern should look about that, and there are tips about what the composition of your compost should be in a residential setting to discourage bears, including using a lot of the ground material, meaning grass clippings, leaves, and stuff like that, compared to the green matter, which is vegetable food waste. But the other thing is yard composting. There are different types of composting containers, closed containers, and they recommend, and this costs a little bit more, using tumblers for your compost, which for 2 years, it's 2 side-by-side round plastic tumblers on a rack that you can spin, because apparently bears can't figure out how to open those. The bears have not figured it out. We have had one of those tumblers probably 8 or 10 years now. A bear has never gotten into it. We do have bears come around. The tumbler is 10 feet away from our trash can. Bears have gotten into our trash can and torn the trash bags apart, even though there is not one scrap of food in those trash bags. So that tells me something about the effectiveness of that particular method. But if you go to that website, if that's an issue, and I know it's been a big issue in Morrisville recently, and in some larger towns where bears are actually moving town, that's a very helpful website. It's called Composting in Bear Country on the Fish and Wildlife website.
That's great information. Thank you very much. And it looks like Elly put a link to that in the chat area. So that it's always good to get real life stories on that. I also wanted to remind everyone that the buckets, the 5-gallon buckets that Lindsay was holding up, they have a really secure screw on top with a gasket. So if A, they don't smell, and B, you really have to have an opposable thumb to be able to open those up well. A bear might be able to knock it over and push it around, but it's not something that they can get into. And we do sell those. Elly's showing you one there as well. Okay, thanks.
Susan, I actually, I have had just today, somebody did send me pictures of a bear who did get into the bottom of the bucket, didn't open the lid, but it did get through the bottom. So they're active this season, they're out and about, and if a bear, I mean, there are lots of things we can do, but I always say if a bear wants it, a bear's gonna get it. So we just need to be really mindful from the beginning in the spring that we're taking in our bird feeders, that we're being smart with our food, that we're keeping our garbage cans secured, and we're not giving them easy access to things that they want. But things that you can also do, there are critter getter motion lights that sometimes help. People are now starting to use ammonia on rags, ammonia soaked rags, and putting those on top of their soil savers or around their soil savers. Those need to be re-dipped occasionally, but that is an approach that people are starting to use now. And there's always a lot of beekeepers are already using electric fencing, but you can install electric fencing that you need to bait the bears to that electric fencing with draping bacon on it or putting peanut butter on it so that they actually get zapped. If they only get zapped on their fur, that doesn't really do anything to them. So if they get it in their mouth, that's when they know you're serious. So you need to give them an unpleasant experience when they come to your property so that they don't come back. So those are physical ways that you can do that. You can also, if you know they're in your neighborhood, if you know they're active, you can just stop composting for a while and just bring it to Lamoille soil. We would happily take that and just give your backyard pile a rest for a little bit until they move on and go back out into the woods and find food in the natural habitat rather than in the neighborhoods.
Terrific.
Great, so that was the last question, unless anyone in the group here had anything to ask. I'm looking, I'm not seeing anyone holding up their hand or.
Can I ask, Lindsay, did you talk to your homeowners association at all? What was their involvement with your implementation leading up to July 1st?
Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself just right away. Unfortunately, we haven't been in much contact about that, just for the sake of all our board meetings have now been on Zoom, and we do have our big owners meeting in October. So it's something we are kind of implementing on a guest-to-guest basis.
Great. Okay, let's see, I think, Elly, were you gonna just give us a little background about what happens at Lamoille Soil and what the organization does? And unless there are other questions, there'll be a lot of contact information at the end. I believe this is all being recorded and will be put back out there on Green Mountain Tech, the local public television access. And yeah, everybody's contact information will be available. So why don't you go ahead, Elly, with your part of this evening presentation.
All right, feel free to ask questions as I am doing this.
I did see a question about who to contact in Franklin County.
Right, Susan, do you have that off the top of your head?
Well, there is a solid waste district in Franklin County called the Northwest Solid Waste Management District, and the director there is John Letty. I unfortunately don't have their information. I'll try and look it up really quickly while we're talking and put it in the chat room. And then Alyssa probably also has a colleague who manages that part of the state as well.
Right. Great. Yes, so we are all of Lamoille County plus Craftsbury and Worcester. So we have 12 towns within the district. And this is what we look like. Get us out of the way here. So I like having Craftsbury and Worcester because they square off Lamoille County really nicely. And I like symmetry, so it helps a lot. We operate 6 transfer stations, which are represented by the green stars here. and most of them are full service. So we take trash, recycling, and food scraps at all of them. And at our Johnson location, we also operate Lamoille Soil, which is our commercial composting facility that opened in 2017. And we are really excited to have that. And this July 1st was the motivation for us to get that facility open. And we are really proud and excited to have it there and have it growing, and to have it be a place where we can service new businesses and partnerships there, and then turn this valuable material into a resource for our local communities to add to the soil. So we're really excited about that. We offer all sorts of services, many of which you've heard about tonight. And one of the things that we do that's not shown on this slide is that we provide the solid waste implementation plan for our 12-member communities, so that they don't all have to individually write and report to the state how they're going to manage solid waste that's generated within their towns. So we do that and submit that for all of those communities. And we are in the process of writing the one for the next 5 years right now. So we do operate those 7 locations that I just showed you. And one thing that we do at those locations is accept harder to manage materials that your curbside haulers aren't necessarily going to operate, or some of the private trash providers, drop-off stations aren't going to take necessarily, like propane tanks or tires or batteries or mattresses, scrap metal, things like that. We also provide customized plans and lessons for schools on recycling and composting, resource conservation. We work with event planners to develop materials management plans for events of all sizes. We go into businesses and help to find resources that make Act 148 compliance as easy as possible. We sell composting and recycling bins at subsidized prices. We do programming for the community at all sorts of levels, for individual groups, for anyone who asks, anyone who needs it. We're usually there. You'll see us at not farmers markets this year, but you'll see us out and about. And then we also do partnerships with local organizations just to help increase the network and be there for just doing things that make sense to help share the network and not necessarily recreate things. So composting options we've covered tonight, for the options for meeting the requirement that's coming up. We can do it at home. This is my green cone and my soil saver right next door. So meat, bones, grease, dairy, moldy, spoiled things, seafood, shells, all of those things go in the green cone. There's 2 feet of a basket that's buried in the soil here, and all of the nutrients as those things break down just leach into the surrounding soil here. And then this is where fruit and vegetable peels and some garden debris, and that recipe of 3 parts of brown material to 1 part green material is really important in this soil saver bin. Drop-off locations are at all 6 of our transfer stations, which are in Craftsbury, Eden, Johnson, Morrisville, Stowe, and Worcester. Right now, due to COVID conditions, our Eden facility is closed, but our Johnson location is just 6 miles down Route 100. And so it is open Friday. Johnson is open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday now to accommodate for that. And then we met our curbside hauler, our organics haulers who are offering curbside pickup in the area right now tonight too. And those are really the ways that we can handle food scraps starting July 1st in Lamoille right now. So we have plenty of resources that are available. Our website is here, lrswmd.org. I try to keep that updated and have resources on there from our colleagues as well. We're all in this together. We all have to meet the intention of the law no matter where we are, and those of us who are doing this are working closely together, and we share shamelessly. So I do use a lot of the materials that my counterparts are using because they're great. We're doing good stuff and we're sharing it. So we also share each other's work on Facebook. We're using our Facebook page a lot now to help share things that are useful and helpful. The Vermont Recycling Compost Initiative is pushing out really great information now too. Alyssa mentioned their website. It's vtrecycles.com. There's no shortage of ways to have questions answered on that website as well. And we have started a new program at the district this year to help our 12-member communities kickstart ways to divert or rescue food scraps with this July 1st date coming up. So we have $500 available for each town to start programs, and that application details are available on our website and can be accepted through December 1st. So for all of you who have attended tonight, if you would be interested in receiving, if you need either a countertop collector or one of our 5-gallon buckets that have the Gamma Seal lids, you can email me at outreach@lrswmd.org and let me know your choice of either the countertop collector or the food scrap bucket, and we will hold one for you until July just for attending this webinar tonight. And that was my dog and pony show for you.
So if I understand properly, Elly, you're giving away countertop collectors and or a bucket.
Choice of, yep.
Okay, so let Elly know at outreach@lrswmd.org. If you would like to get one of those, we have the list of participants and we'll hold on to it in the office. Note that, like most people, we have somewhat reduced hours in our office, and we're trying to be very careful about who comes, so it's probably best to contact us ahead of time when you come to pick that up. So
right, if you just email me, I almost said outreach me, email me, and then we can go ahead and schedule and make arrangements for picking up.
Terrific. So last chance for live questions. And while I'm waiting to see if anybody raised their hand, I again just want to thank everybody for being here tonight. There's still plenty of daylight out because we're still in late spring and there's lots and lots of sunshine. And this isn't the only opportunity you have to learn. Elly is available, Alyssa is available. You have contact information available for multiple resources. You have 3 food scrap haulers here. If you want, you can also reach out to your trash hauler that they may be able to provide you with something, but we definitely have 3 really unique, wonderful, organic specific haulers who are doing a phenomenal job and really building in this very small sort of rural part of the state a great network, so that it should be really easy and possible for everybody to figure out a way, whether you're a resident, whether you're a small business or homeowners association, to go forward with that. So again, thanks everyone so much. Our legislators, thank you kindly for taking your time tonight. Really appreciate you all being here. And any last words from anyone?
I'd also just like to thank everyone for attending and for putting all of this information together.
And thank you, Tess. The Chamber of Commerce is working really, really hard with us to help this happen, despite the fact that they've got a lot of other things on their plates right now with COVID and businesses just starting to reopen. So we really, really appreciate their partnership in this. All right. Get outside and enjoy the sunshine. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.